In our steamy summer series, which we've been having in July, and today we have been reading from the Song of Songs. And I must say the readings, I think, are more steamy today than the weather. The Song of Songs is love poetry. It is sensual. It is explicit. It is the language of the spirit, the soul, and of the body. The poems and prayers of those in the Christian mystic tradition are in the same vein. So I'm going to read a poem by Teresa of Avila, who is a contemplative who lived in the 16th century, and then Alison will read the scripture. If the sun took you in his arms, when my mouth touched his, I became invisible, the way the earth would if the sun took it into its arms. The ecstatic death I know. What can touch his exquisite form is not anything that can be seen. How do we make love to God? How does the soul make love to God? How does the soul make love to God? The heart has divine instincts. It just needs to be turned loose in the sky. Does not every angel know where he lives and will be on his door all night if it is locked?
Our scripture reading this morning is from the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, chapters 7 and 8. You can follow along if you wish in the red Bibles in the pews, page 615. Let's dive in. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Your two breasts are like twin fawns, twins of a gazelle. Your neck is like an ivory tower. Your eyes are like pools in Heshbon by the gate of Beth Rabim. Your nose is like a tower in Lebanon, overlooking Damascus. Your head crowns you like Carmel, and your flowing locks are purple. A king is held captive in the tresses. How fair and pleasant you are, O loved one, delectable maiden. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I say I will climb the palm tree and lay hold of its branches. Oh, may your breasts be like clusters on the vine, and the scent of your breath like apples, and your kisses like the best wine that goes down smoothly, gliding over lips and teeth. I am my beloved's, and his desire is for me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the fields and lodge in the villages. Let us go out early to the vineyards and see whether the vines have budded, whether the grape blossoms have opened and the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes give forth fragrance over our doors, are all choice fruits, new as well as old, which I have laid up for you, my beloved. Oh, that you were like a brother to me, who nursed at my mother's breast. If I met you outside, I would kiss you, and no one would despise me. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother and into the chamber of the one who bore me. I would give you spiced wine to drink, the juice of my pomegranates. Oh, that his left hand were under my head and that his right hand embraced me. I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not stir up or awaken love until it is ready. Who is that coming up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? Under the apple tree I awakened you. There your mother was in labor with you. There she who bore you was in labor. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly scorned. We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister on this day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. But if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. I was a wall, and my breasts were like towers. Then I was in his eyes as one who brings peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Haman. He entrusted the vineyard to keepers. Each one was to bring for its fruit 1,000 pieces of silver. My vineyard, my very own, is for myself. You, O Solomon, may have the 1,000, and the keepers of the fruit 200. O you who dwell in the gardens, my companions are listening for your voice. Let me hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of spices. And here ends our reading. Well, there is a memory that I have that I return to like a ritual over and over again. A streak, a banner of blood flashes through the air, and men crowd close to the beloved bodies of my brother and my cousin. Tough blows fall like rain, and the pronounced sense of powerlessness is in the screams that we lift up to no one. It was nearly a decade ago that my brother, my cousin, and I were attacked by a group of men on a poorly lit street in Quito, Ecuador. We survived, but each of us in the time since have struggled in our own way to make sense of it, alternating between panic attacks, substance abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety disorders, and in my case, writing sermons about it. At the age of 22, this was the first authentic glimpse I had caught into my own mortality and into the mortality we all inhabit. The bone and the blood and the vomit and the tears that I witnessed that night congealed to form a mortar, sealing my fate that my body is penetrable. All our bodies are penetrable. I now understood with horrible clarity that this skin we wear is not a wall of bulletproof glass, but rather a porous barrier through which worldly molecules are sucked in and spat out like the cream we spread on our elbows, like the sweat we emit with exertion. Our homecoming 1 week later was to a gaggle of loved ones awaiting our arrival at the airport. Haggard faces greeted us, worried eyes and puckered chins, as we paraded down the escalators attempting to prove our relative health and general wellness. We were not very convincing, as you might imagine, but as our bodies were embraced, as familiar arms enfolded us, for me at least, my healing began. That moment of healing, that embrace, that is how it is with love. Well, you may find this a strange way to begin a sermon about the Song of Songs. After all, just moments ago, I was reading aloud one of the most delicious texts in the Bible, a sensual and erotic traversing of a lover's body from toe to head. I don't know if you counted it, but there were at least 4 different ways that breasts were described in that text. But I have the liberty to be a little creative because, as many of you know, this is now the 4th consecutive sermon you've heard on the Song of Songs. And I also know that you all know, as I do, that even as we embrace one another with the most intimate of grasps, to love one another is to risk terrible pain, We love in the midst of life, which is also to say that we love at the risk of loss. And the song talks about this. The song portrays this risk as danger. Last week, Jane spoke about the sentinels, the watchmen of the night, who in chapter 5 strip the woman. They beat her and bruise her simply for walking about the town at night in search of her lover. In today's passage, we hear the woman wishing her lover were like a brother to her. It may sound strange to our ears, but her wish is logical. At that time, she could be seen with a brother in public, even kiss her brother in public, but not so with an unrelated man. To do so was a violation of social norms, and it was a dangerous act. Gender roles were notoriously strict in ancient Israel. Most of us know that adulterous women in ancient Mesopotamia were often stoned to death. What we don't always remember is that very few women who behaved outside of the social norms in the Bible are actually praised for it. Israel, in biblical texts, is frequently portrayed as God's adulterous wife, who in the book of Hosea is stripped, exposed, and beaten for her infidelities. Sex in the Mediterranean was first and foremost seen as an expression of power, with two actors, the superior, the one doing the penetrating, and the weaker, the one being raped. To be a woman was to be understood systematically and unquestionably as the inferior, weaker sex. So within this broader context, it is certainly remarkable that the song portrays a female character who not only names what she wants, who not only pursues it apologetically, but is portrayed positively for doing so. For any ancient Israelite text to celebrate female desire, the female body, and female sexuality, and to have it upheld in the canonization of the Bible, well, that is enough to make any modern-day feminist weak in the knees. I mean, let's look at this stuff. In chapter 7, the woman in the poem is compared to a queen with rounded thighs like jewels and a nose as elegant as the Tower of Lebanon. Her breasts are first compared to twin gazelles, then to coconuts at the top of a stately palm tree. Finally, they become like clusters of grapes on the vine, significantly sweeter, closer to the ground, and easier to pluck than your average coconut or gazelle. As the lover's passionate description of the woman continues, we, the listeners, are brought in closer to her, more intimately learning of the apple sweetness of her breath, of her kisses, which are compared to the smoothest, sweetest wine gliding over lips and teeth. My beloved is mine, and I am my beloved's, she declares in avid response to her lover's adoration. And she calls him forth to the gardens and to the vineyards, where the pomegranates are in bloom and where she has saved up the choicest fruit for him to consume. At this point, I think we can safely say that she probably isn't talking exclusively about fruit. And yet danger is never far around the corner. These two chapters of the song, as with most of the song before it, are fraught with unrequited longing, with an undercurrent of tension and danger throughout. The woman repeatedly expresses her wish to kiss her lover openly in the streets, and she adjures the daughters of Jerusalem, her audience, not to awaken love before it is ready, presumably because it is too dangerous to do so. Later in chapter 8, she must defend herself and her actions to her brothers, who see her as a child and who threaten to lock her away from the rest of the world. Any of us who have loved, romantic or not, know what it is to have our love threatened. For my family, the night that my brother and I and my cousin were attacked, the danger was men in the streets in the city at night who threatened to take our lives. But danger comes in many forms. A friend of mine recently gave birth to a stillborn child named Emmeline. The danger she faced was preeclampsia, and it took her child before they were even able to meet face to face. For some, danger is named racism, and it allows a man to legally shoot and kill a 17-year-old boy for playing his music too loud, as was the case for Jordan Davis in Jacksonville, Florida, another victim of the Stand Your Ground laws. Some of us face danger in the form of our own inner demons, depression or addiction or anxiety, which try to convince us that we are unlovable or undeserving of love. And heartbreaking loss comes still in the form of divorce, sexism, betrayal, homophobia, anger, abuse, or even in the simple breaking down of our bodies over time. At times it can feel as though danger stalks us from every angle, ever present, as vigilant as the watchman of the wall. To love others is to risk the pain of loss. And yet the act of loving others in spite of this loss is to defy death itself, to stake claim to the idea that love is strong as death. Set me as a seal upon your heart, says the woman in the song, for love is strong as death. Yes, set me as a seal on your arm, for passion is as strong as the grave. It has become a recent trend for some couples when they marry to tattoo their wedding bands on their fingers. But the woman in the song goes even a step farther than that. She's not even hoping to be branded upon her lover's heart, as our modern ears might hear it, but to be made a part of his seal, which in the ancient world would have been something like his signature. A person's seal was dipped in ink and rolled upon a sheet of paper. It was cylindrical. The opposite impression was much like a modern-day stamp, and it acted as the individual's signature when signing significant documents or sending letters. They were often worn on a chain or hung around one's neck, coming to rest atop the heart, or around the arm or the wrist in a bangle. When the woman commands her lover to set her as a seal on his heart or on his arm, she was not merely asking for their love to be branded upon his being, but indeed that she become as much a part of him as his very identity. Were she branded upon his heart as a memory, she seems to say, his love would die with his death. Were he to set her as a physical, permanent seal on his body, it would turn to dust just as surely as would his body. But to incorporate their love into his seal, into his very identity, the woman believes is to transcend and outlast death. She becomes a part of him in life and in death. His signature remains in significant documents, his identity in the memory of the communities he's left behind, and his very being, even in death, is bound up in hers. When we give of our love to others, we are tapping into the essence of who we are as human beings. When we open up ourselves to vulnerability, we change and are changed by those whom we love. It is in the experience of mutually reaching out to one another with our bodies and our hearts and our minds that rebelliously defies death's sting. In this way, we confront death. In the acts of loving, embracing, connecting, holding, conversing, admiring, laughing, touching, consoling, stroking, clutching one another. We love in spite of death. We love in the midst of death. We love at risk of death. And we love in defiance of death. For love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. So make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag upon the mountains of spices. come to the garden.